You're watching DX Recaps, the place where we break down movies fast, clear, and spoiler-packed. Whether you missed it, forgot it, or just want a quick refresh, we've got you covered. Let's get into the story. On the planet Yaya Prime, a small runt predator named Dek is undergoing a training mission. He uses a variety of tools to travel across the harsh terrain until he enters a dark cave. His scanner warns him that his brother is hiding nearby. Dek attacks from behind with his sword, but his brother Key blocks it instantly. The two begin to fight, and Key keeps taunting Dek, reminding him to use the cave's structure to his advantage. Their blades clash again and again as they move through the cave. Eventually, Key corners Dek but chooses not to kill him. When Dek refuses to yield, Key simply cuts the pillar beneath them, causing Dek to fall into a deep abyss. Dek manages to survive by grabbing onto the cave wall and climbing back up, launching himself at Key once more. Later, aboard their ship, Key tells Dek it's time to choose a prey so he can finally earn his place in the Aya clan. Dek declares he wants to travel to Jenna, also known as the Death Planet, to hunt the unkillable monster called the Kalisk. Even their father fears this creature, and that's exactly why Dek wants to go after it. He's tired of being treated like a weakling. Key disapproves, but Dek makes his vow anyway. At that moment, their father Nyar arrives. Dek greets him with a traditional offering of his own blood. But Nyar immediately questions why Dek is still alive, revealing he had ordered Key to kill him for being too weak to ever join the clan. Key argues that Dek deserves a chance. Furious, Nyar throws a device that traps Dek and orders Key to finish him. Instead, Key frees Dek and blasts him into the ship with a laser. Nyar opens fire, so Key activates his shield to protect Dek. With the ship sealed so Dek can't escape, Nyar and Key begin fighting. In just a few moves, Key manages to disarm their father. Nyar activates his camouflage cloak, but Key keeps attacking blindly. Suddenly, Nyar stabs Key's hand and cuts off his arm. He strikes his son down as Key crawls away, reaching not for his sword but for his severed arm. Nyar calls him weak and stabs him. With his final breath, Key activates the ship and sends Dek to Jenna. Dek watches his brother's lifeless body vanish as the ship launches, and knocks him unconscious. Sometime later, Dek awakens to an alarm. The ship has been damaged by orbiting debris and is plummeting toward Jenna. He rushes to the pilot's seat and ejects just in time, falling at high speed through the hostile sky. A giant bird nearly strikes him, forcing him to activate his shield. He eventually crashes into the jungle and roars in frustration. Determined to begin his hunt, Dek checks his weapons and investigates a nearby noise. Suddenly, a vine-like creature snatches one of his weapons. Dek prepares to strike, but another vine grabs his arm. He cuts the second vine, but the first escapes. More vines attack him from every direction and drag him across the ground. Dek quickly fires an arrow to free himself, then punches the vines to keep them at bay. He retrieves his sword and slashes through wave after wave of attackers. But the vines just keep coming. He dodges, leaps onto one of the vines, and runs across it until he reaches the top of a cliff where they can't reach him. From up high, he finally sees the terrifying landscape of the planet. At a river, Dek washes his wounds and uses his scanner to locate a medicinal plant. He finds a worm on a large leaf growing red spheres. When he tosses it away, it explodes, confirming its use as a bomb. He heads out again in search of the Kalisk. In a field, he passes strange red plants that hiss at him. He steps carefully to avoid them. Then he hears a voice. Looking up, he spots Thea, a synthetic android, trapped inside a massive nest. She switches to a universal translator so he can understand her. Suddenly, a Jenna vulture arrives. It throws a rock at the red plants, causing them to burst with red smoke and fire needles in every direction. Dek narrowly dodges them. Thea warns him that these needles will paralyze him so the vulture can feast on him. When she asks for a weapon, Dek refuses. Yaya hunters work alone. But she correctly guesses he is here for the Kalisk. The vulture throws another rock, activating more plants. Dek is struck by needles and begins to lose consciousness. Thea begs for a weapon, so he tosses a blade her way before collapsing. The vulture swoops down, but Thea tackles it and brutally kills it with the blade. Dek sees her waving at him before passing out. A short while later, Dek wakes up to find Thea has given him an antidote made from the same flower. He helps her stand, only to notice half her body is missing. She explains she is a synthetic created by the Wayland Yutani Corporation. Because humans can't survive on this world, Dek doesn't care and drops her. She warns him that many Yaoya hunters have come for the Kalisk, and none survived. She's the only one who has lived long enough to reach its den. If he takes her with him, she'll guide him to the lair. He'll get his trophy, and she'll get new legs. Dek realizes the Kalisk is the creature that destroyed her, but still refuses, until she calls herself a tool. That makes it acceptable within Yaoya code. He agrees. As they travel, Thea talks non-stop, asking endless questions. At the river, strange worms begin shooting acid. Dek carries Thea on his back to move faster. When their path is blocked, she uses it as a teaching moment. She throws a sticky fruit onto the ground, distracting the worms long enough for them to pass safely. After leaving the river, Dek cuts vines to tie Thea onto his back for easier movement. At night, they make camp. Thea explains her crew arrived 2 years ago and she was trapped in the vulture nest for 2 weeks. She hoped another synthetic named Tessa would rescue her. Thea explains that she and Tessa were built with heightened sensitivity, which Dek sees as weakness. She insists it helps them understand other beings. She was stuck in a lab until Tessa brought her out to explore. Unfortunately, that was the day the Kalisk attacked. Meanwhile, at a distant base, Tessa, who looks identical to Thea, lies severely damaged inside a repair pod. She keeps whispering Thea's name as the computer reminds her that her mission is to capture the Kalisk. It detects a Yaoya on the planet and labels him a threat. When Tessa awakens, she is informed that Thea was captured by the Yaoya. The next morning, Dek looks for food. He spots a bone bison, a favorite meal of the Kalisk. As he prepares to attack, he discovers the field is covered in razor grass. Before he can act, a small creature drops from a tree. Thea can't identify it. Dek roars at the creature, but it simply roars back before chasing the bison unharmed. Its thick skin protects it from the razor grass. Frustrated, Dek jumps from tree to keep up with the hunt. A branch breaks beneath them and they fall. He pierces the tree with his blade to save them before hitting the deadly grass. When the bison runs past, Dek leaps onto it and stabs it, but the creature flings them off. The small creature rolls ahead, and a furious Dek tackles it. The two fight while Thea gets smashed repeatedly. The small creature is surprisingly strong. Dek eventually grabs it by the neck, but then the bison charges toward them. Dek throws his sword, holding the bison's mouth open long enough for the blade to slice it in half. As Dek celebrates, a tentacle grabs him from behind. It's a Luna bug. Its tight tongue holds him in place, preventing him from activating his devices. As they're about to be eaten, the small creature leaps into the bug's mouth. Its tough hide breaks the bug's teeth, causing the monster to spit them out and retreat, angry. Dek cuts down a tree to make a bridge across the razor grass. The small creature is already rolling across the field. The Luna bug captures it again, but Dek jumps onto the bug's head and drives his sword deep into it, delivering a killing blow. Meanwhile, Tessa and her synthetic crew continue searching for Thea. They find Dek's crashed pod but are attacked by vines. The team fires their weapons, then burns the vines with flamethrowers to clear a path. That evening, Dek and Thea make camp once more. The little creature continues following Dek, copying his every move, completely impressed by how he brought down the bison. Thea decides to name the creature Bud, and Dek even shares some roasted meat with it. When Thea asks about his family, Dek reluctantly explains what happened with his brother and father, though he refuses to admit he's grieving when Thea uses the word. She points out that Tessa is essentially her sister, and Thea warms to the idea. Meanwhile, during the night, Tessa and her team finally locate Dek's crashed ship. Inside, they discover a variety of Yaoya weapons, including a freezing grenade that instantly freezes Tessa's hand when she picks it up. The following morning, Dek grabs Thea and leaves without Bud. He insists he hunts alone and that Thea doesn't count because she is a tool. Thea tries to explain how wolves hunt as a pack and how the alpha isn't the best killer, but the one who protects the others. Dek misunderstands completely. He declares he'll simply be the alpha who kills the most. After discovering a Kalisk fang near the river, they follow the trail until they reach Thea's original base, now completely destroyed by the beast. Among dozens of synthetic bodies, Thea finds her missing legs. Luckily, the repair machines still work, and she begins reconnecting the two halves of her body, though it will take some time. She thanks Dek for helping her get this far but apologizes as she activates a beacon to summon her crew. She explains that her team is also hunting the Kalisk, meaning she can't allow Dek to kill it. Dek refuses to run. He'd rather die with honor than flee like a coward. Seeing spilled oil in the wreckage, Dek lights it to create a cloud of smoke. Moments later, The Callisk appears and slams Deck to the ground, damaging his sword. Deck uses a metal scrap as a shield, slides beneath the beast, and slices its belly. He follows up by throwing a small blade into its head and severing its tail, only for the tail to grow back instantly. The wounds close, revealing why the beast is considered unkillable. The Callisk grabs Deck and hurls him into the repair machine, knocking Thea's legs off the table. When the creature seizes him again, Deck slashes its tongue to break free. The fight becomes more desperate as Thea struggles to retrieve her legs. Spotting a gun on the ground, she fires to distract the creature. Deck takes advantage, throws a chain into the Callisk's mouth, and activates a machine that reels the chain in, dragging the monster backward. He grabs Thea's gun and fires repeatedly. When the Callisk strikes with its tail, Deck dodges and slams a storage door shut, trapping the tail. He climbs up the beast's body and leaps high, slicing off its head. But even decapitation isn't enough. The head crawls back and reattaches to the body. The Callisk pins Deck down and sniffs him. Something in his scent stops it from attacking. Before anything else happens, Tessa lobs a freezing grenade that immobilizes both Deck and the monster, allowing her team to capture them. Deck wakes strapped to a table inside the crew's vehicle. Thea remains in suspension mode, attached to a repair module. Tessa, after reading all of Thea's logs, expresses confusion about how Deck is even alive since Yaoya typically kill weak children. She claims belonging to her company should be an honor for him. When she wakes Thea, she congratulates her on capturing 2 valuable specimens. Tessa injects Deck with something painful to begin experiments. To save him, Thea calmly suggests Deck is a runt and therefore not scientifically valuable. She recommends keeping only his weapons and letting him go. Tessa still wants a biological sample and attaches 2 cables to Deck's head, causing him severe agony. Desperate, Thea shuts down the machine and argues that they can be more than emotionless robots. They can be sisters. Tessa coldly reveals she never came to save Thea, only to capture the Callisk. She even agrees with the Yaoya belief that the weak should be discarded, calling Thea broken. Tessa receives a transmission from Earth and leaves, ordering a guard to box Thea up. Since the guard doesn't speak Yaw, Deck tells Thea to trick him into opening one of Deck's devices. When the guard unlocks it, his head explodes. Thea frees Deck, but alarms go off and more guards open fire. Thea opens the back hatch and Deck jumps into a waterfall to escape. Deck later finds his crashed pod and tends to his wounds, disappointed to find no weapons left. He considers leaving the planet, but spotting his brother's helmet reminds him of Thea's words about wolves. The strongest protects the pack. Motivated, Deck returns to the jungle and collects natural weapons, razor grass blades, spikes from red flowers, and an acid worm lured by fruit. While gathering, he encounters Bud again and smells its spit. Suddenly, he realizes Bud is the Callisk's child, and that the reason the adult spared Deck earlier was because he smelled like the cub. Deck covers Bud in his own spit to blend their scents, then frees Thea's detached legs and uses them to track the rest of her body. At the new base, Deck appears wearing armor made of bison bones and takes down a guard with acid. The mechanical legs follow Thea's signal and kick off an intense stealth attack. When guards try to interfere, Deck defeats them using a whip made from vines and razor grass, while Bud demolishes another guard effortlessly. Together, they sneak through the base, clearing a path so the legs can reach Thea. Meanwhile, Tessa confidently reports to the company that they'll soon return to Earth with the Callisk and claims Deck is already dead. With his natural weapons, Deck fights waves of synthetic guards, even turning lab hazards against them. When Thea's legs discover her container, they launch themselves onto a guard's neck, killing him instantly and opening the box. Thea wakes delighted, but quickly pretends to sleep again when guards approach. In seconds, a coordinated attack between Thea and her legs destroys all remaining enemies. Deck arrives only to find the box empty until Thea appears and kills the guard sneaking up behind him. Fully reconnected, she's surprised to see Deck return. He proudly says he came back for his pack. Deck insists on freeing the Callisk, so Bud can reunite with its mother. Suddenly alarms sound. Tessa orders her men to rush the launch of the ship holding the Callisk. A squad finds Deck, but he detonates the combustible worms, killing them all in a massive explosion. Tessa enters in a powerful battlesuit armed with a laser stolen from Deck's pod. She fires, destroying his acid worm. She tears down structures, activating a giant saw blade to kill him. While she keeps him pinned, Thea sneaks into the main ship and tries to access the Callisk's cage. When a guard catches her, she slams his head into the cage, killing him, then uses his eyes to unlock the door. A powerful blast sends Deck into the lab, and part of Tessa's suit gets stuck in the vines. Deck tries climbing it, but she flings him off. He hides behind a container, climbs on top of it, and ambushes her from above. She quickly seals the suit's cockpit. Suddenly the Callisk charges in and leaps onto the suit. Tessa drives the saw into the creature, lifting it off the ground. While she's distracted, Deck climbs onto the suit's back and tears out cables to slow it down. Tessa throws a freezing grenade at the Callisk, but Deck bats it away with a metal rod, causing it to freeze the suit's arm instead. The Callisk rips out the saw, attacks the suit, and tears it clean in half. When the top half crashes to the ground, the Callisk devours Tessa. Deck reunites with Thea and Bud as the Callisk steps out to check on its cub. Deck gently bumps foreheads with the creature, showing respect. Suddenly, the Callisk explodes. Tessa had survived inside its stomach long enough to activate another ice grenade. She crawls out of the remains and lunges at Thea, but Deck impales her from behind, finally killing her. Bud viciously tears off her head. Sometime later, Deck returns to the Yaoya homeland and presents his father with Tessa's head. Nyar still calls him a disgrace and orders 2 guards to kill him, but Deck kills them easily. He battles his father, who turns invisible. But Deck activates the ship's engines to create a sandstorm and reveal his location. He cuts off Nyar's arm and traps him in a cage device. When Nyar tells him he may join the clan if he yields, Deck says he already has a clan. At that moment, a now fully grown Bud bites off Nyar's head. Thea congratulates Deck as he claims his father's cloak. A ship descends from the sky, and Deck looks up, saying it's his mother. And that's a wrap on today's recap. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a plot twist. Got a movie you want recapped? Drop it in the comments below. This is DX Recaps. See you in the next one.